Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. The following interview is designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be. Your host, Derek Champagne, is the founder and CEO of The Artist Evolution, a full-service agency building successful brands, marketing tools, and campaigns, and also the author of the best-selling book, Don't Buy a Duck. And now, let's begin today's Leadership Series interview.
Welcome to the Business Leadership Series, where our goal is to inspire you to become the best leader that you can be. Our guest today is Marissa Levin. She is the co-founder and managing partner of Successful Culture International and has been a 25-year CEO and entrepreneur of multi-million-dollar businesses, taking on the challenge to educate, equip, and empower 100 million fellow entrepreneurs and leaders across the globe. She's been named SmartCEO 3 times, been named Washington's Top 100 Technology Titan, has served on Global Communications Committee of Entrepreneurs Organization, and she's the author of the #1 best-selling book, Built to Scale: How Top Companies Create Breakthrough Growth Through Exceptional Advisory Boards. Marissa, thank you for taking a few minutes with us today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be here. I love the work that you do.
Hey, I had an opportunity to see you at the Scale Up Summit in Atlanta. That's been 6 or so weeks ago, and enjoyed your message and thought our audience will get great benefit from learning from you. Give us, just if you don't mind, a couple minutes and give us your backstory, just so we can get to know you better. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm about a 25-year entrepreneur. I launched my first company 25 or 26 years ago. That's called Information Experts. I grew that to about $15 million until I left that company 7 or 8 years ago. I put a succession plan in place because really I kind of had gotten burned out working with the federal government, and I wanted to do something differently. And so I put a succession plan in place, and that's when I launched Successful Culture. And that was a venture really where I would work with leaders and organizations on their strategy, their organizational culture, and just overall personal and organizational development. About 2 years ago, I merged that with a company called People Tactics to create Successful Culture International. And our work through that, we've developed a proprietary culture development lifecycle that we take into organizations of all sizes to really help them through an end-to-end process to build extraordinary places to work. So really fun activities to help create great places for employees and leaders. And then along the way, as you mentioned, I have my book out on how to build advisory boards. My advisory board at my first company was an instrumental tool in helping us achieve the success and the growth that we achieved. And so I've kind of bottled that magic formula, created a model out of it, and now my book is in about 14 different countries and used by thousands of different entrepreneurs everywhere to help them also create great advisory boards.
I want to jump back to the advisory board conversation, but I think it's so important. First, let's take just a couple minutes. You talk about building extraordinary culture, and culture is a word that we hear thrown around quite a bit. But a lot of businesses don't quite know what to do with it. Maybe they think it means a foosball table. By the way, we have one in our office. Ping pong tables, yes, but it's so much more than that. Give us kind of the 1,000-foot view of what you're seeing, what your experience is with just some top highlights of building an extraordinary culture.
So it's interesting that, culture is a great buzzword, but it really is the DNA of an organization, and it always has been. I was fortunate to actually be on Tony Robbins' podcast. He had read an interview with me with Entrepreneur Magazine where I talked about organizational culture, and that every organization has a culture, whether it's by intention or by default. But even if you don't focus on it, you still have a culture. So for us, when I was building my first company, I am someone who is a very values-centric person. Values determine how I show up in my personal life and my professional life. And so when I first launched my first company, the very first thing that I did was create our core value system, our mission, and our vision. So that gives you, the what you stand for, why you exist, and where you're going. And a company cannot grow without those three fundamental identity elements. And those become really kind of the linchpins of a corporate culture. So, we can talk about how culture has become trendy and how all of a sudden it's something that every company must have. But this is not a new concept. When leaders can truly define and clearly define what they stand for, what behaviors will be acceptable, what behaviors won't be acceptable, what are their standards for engaging with all stakeholders, whether it's an employee, whether it's a customer, a strategic partner, a vendor, whoever that might be. It's the same group of core values and what you stand for that drive all business decisions. And one of the things that I communicate with all of my clients and help them really understand and create a mindset shift around is that there are no bad employees. There are only undesirable behaviors that are not in alignment with what the core values are. So when you create an organization truly based on what you stand for, why you exist and where you're going, that becomes the DNA of your corporate culture. And I want to just mention about values. We can't teach values. Leaders can only model values. And there's a difference.
That's huge. That's really important. So let's say I'm a company. I've bought into the idea that I need to work on my culture. I want to engage my employees. Where are leaders missing the mark with implementation?
I think that they lose sight of what they stand for and why they started the business in the first place. Like, what was the driver? And I don't mean making money, because, unless you're a nonprofit, we're all in business to make money.
Sure.
But what is the driver behind why you exist? What is the impact that you're trying to make in the world? What type of experience are you trying to create for your customer as well as your employees? And when we can hold tight to that, where problems happen is when we lose sight of all of that, where we start to compromise our what we stand for, what we believe, what our core value system is. When we start to compromise that, that's a really slippery slope, and that's where we invite in the problems. So if you can build a company around your core values, and that means your recruiting processes, your onboarding processes, how people treat each other internally, how you engage with your customer, what behavior you will and will not tolerate from your customer, creating a customer base that also has values that align with your own values. And that was part of the reason why I left. Well, that was one of the main reasons I left my first company that I built out of nothing. I walked away from my first company because we were serving the federal government, and they transitioned and they moved from being an entity that truly valued value and valued relationships to only valuing lowest price. And they became a transactional, commodity-centric type of customer. And I was never going to be a lowest priced vendor for the government, because we delivered true transformation and true value through deep relationships that were built on trust. So when they made that pivot, I, as the owner, was put in a position of having to make my own decision. Do I compromise and change my own core values to meet the needs of my customers? Or do I step down and walk away from something I've built because it no longer aligned with what I believed? And I chose the latter. So I think that companies get into trouble when they truly lose sight of what they stand for and what they believe. And when they start to compromise that, and whenever we do, personal or professional life, that's where we get into trouble.
That's great advice. It really is. We went through a painful niche down pivot in our own organization in January of last year. I can remember the day we made the decision to be brutally honest with ourselves. And it started with me. I realized I was the problem as the CEO and the founder. And I realized that I was not, and that's one of the reasons the show is about, is being intentional in our leadership and being authentic in what we do. But to actually live the peace that comes with actually not just writing core values, but actually living them, and to see the team and see them, you making tough choices that even hurt sometimes because you're not going to compromise, is a big deal. And I did not live that. And I've had several companies. I didn't live it until last year. And it is a game changer. Thank you for pointing that out and for sharing that. That's a big deal, to walk away from your baby that you've
I know, it was
grown.
hard. It was a psychological bloodbath. There's no doubt, and I watched our customer, I watched the government, basically dismantle my culture. It was horrendous. And, I know that we don't have, a lot of time together, but my personal journey, also impacts my business decisions because it's all connected. And I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a melanoma survivor. I had a brush with breast cancer that fortunately, went in a good way, but I've dodged 2 cancer bullets. And so because of that, I think that I have a very healthy respect for mortality, and I think I have a very low level of tolerance for unhappiness. Now, as a business owner, I've always believed that business ownership should be challenging. It's definitely going to be hard, but it should never make you miserable. And so as a leader, and just as a person, I'm very attuned to the messages that I tell myself, whether they're conscious or subconscious. And when we're in a position, whether it's personal or professional, and we have resistance and anxiety consistently around a situation, that anxiety and resistance is speaking very loud and clear to us that something's not right and it has to change. And so we cannot be true to others as a leader or as, a friend, as anyone in our life, if we're not first true to ourselves. And I knew that my company, because of the shifts that it was going through and the changes with the government as my customer, I knew that I couldn't be the leader that the company needed because fundamentally I didn't believe in the value system of my customer. So I had to step down. There's a lot of talk about the Peter principle, where people in organizations rise to their highest level of incompetence, and they're no longer, we try and promote people up and up in an organization because we want to reward loyalty, we want to reward hard work, and so we think we'll promote them and we'll promote them and we'll promote them. But then ultimately what happens is we promote them so high up that they are no longer aligned with the skill sets that is required of an organization. And the Peter principle happens to the C-suite as well. But it takes a leader who doesn't live or lead from ego and who truly believes that a leader's greatest job is to subjugate the greater good, to subjugate their own agenda for the greater good of the organization. So I found myself in that crossroads because I no longer got joy out of what I was doing, and I didn't believe in the core value of my customer. Whereas when we first went into the government, I was so behind the mission of the different agencies, but then it all became about price, and that didn't align with who I was. And so I had no choice but to step down.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. When I like to hit some of the small moments too. I mean, you're able to talk about it now. I know it was tough choices. Sometimes it's easy looking back, but what in the moment, because there was a lot of little moments for you that were hard during that time. Oh my goodness. The amount of countless hours and of agonizing on the right choices. Give me 1 or 2 guiding principles that helped you in those small moments too, to go, you know what, it is time. I'm going to take action right now.
Sure. I can remember when there was a government shutdown and we were doing work for one of the agencies, and our work that we were doing was labeled and deemed as essential, which meant that my people had to show up, right? I had a whole team of resources that were billable, that were showing up to do work, but yet the office that was processing the invoices, the government deemed that was non-essential, which meant that office was closed. And so every day I'm sending multiple people to work, and my invoices are like thousands and thousands of other invoices are piling up on someone's desk and in someone's financial system by the government of all. I'm a small business. I'm a bug. Like I'm a $15 million business doing business with our government. And here I was put in the position of having to finance our government because they couldn't process my invoices and I couldn't pay my employees. Wow. So, unless you are really in the thick of government shutdowns, and I know that we've had a few in the past recently, you hear about it, you read about it. those are things that put businesses out of business.
Wow.
Businesses that do everything right, businesses that do really good work, businesses that are led and built by really ethical, hardworking, smart people, and our government has the capacity and the ability to bankrupt them.
Wow.
And so being in that position where I couldn't pay my people, but I was literally ordered by my customer to show up and work, I just decided this is not the life that I want, or the fact that I had to cut people that had been with me for years and gotten me to where I needed to, where I was, but I had to cut them because overnight the government cut my hourly rates and I could no longer afford them. So there were just decisions that, and like I said, business ownership should always be challenging, but it should never make you miserable. And so I just made a decision that, you know what, I have so much value that I can bring to this world. There are so many ways in which my experience and my knowledge and my passion and my insight can help other business owners build their greatest businesses and reach their own personal and organizational potential, that I wasn't going to stay in the misery. We all have to take ownership for our own outcomes, right? We have to take responsibility for our decisions and our lives. And so it was very hard, but I just had faith that the value that I could bring, I wasn't done yet. And I knew that I could take all that I had learned by building an extraordinary culture and building a great business and everything that I had learned, and I could take that to other business owners and help them achieve the same. And so that's why I launched Successful Culture.
I love that you're doing that. I want to take just a minute with the few minutes we have left and talk about advisory boards, but I just want to commend you on making that decision, because I see so many leaders. A lot of them are scrappy and make a change if they want to make a change, but I see so many leaders who are in handcuffs and stay in an unhappy situation for their career. They just do. And so you're in a great example, number one, of making that change, making the tough choices, knowing you have a lot to offer, assessing the situation, making the change, and then a plug for you. Who better to learn from than somebody that's been through those pivots and those changes than from someone like you who can navigate those waters and understands it. So again, thank you for, by example, leading and making the change. I think it's super important. I see unhappy leaders sometimes, and especially entrepreneurs, and I've been one of them in the past. And I say, you created this. This was your vision. If you don't like it, change it or make a change. But we don't always do that because we've built this baby, and sometimes it becomes a prison for us. So.
Right. And it's very hard to let go of something that we've built. Yeah. And we so often, and this is in both personal and business, so often we desperately cling to something that is no longer working because we've told ourselves that if we let go and if we pivot, somehow that's a failyer. And it's not a failure. Everything has seasons, right? And I'm a huge Wayne Dyer fan. I interject a lot of spirituality into my leadership and into my strategy. And he talks about how, in every storm, there is a calm. In every flood, there is dryness, right? Whenever we're in the valley, we will ultimately rise again to be at the top of the mountain. And we have to have faith that no matter how low we get or how bad things seem to get, that we will always rise again. And we should not be in a sacrificial mode where we're holding on to something that no longer works for us just for the sake of holding on to it. So just being able to really, look at the totality of our life rather than just the moment that we are in, but look at the totality and realize that we all have so much to contribute this world. And how can we be in the position to contribute as much as possible to the world? Like, what are we? And that's the question to ask ourselves every day. Like, what I'm doing today, am I in the position where I am able to make the largest impact possible? And that is that's a great navigator on whether or not we're doing the right things.
Great advice. And everybody listening has that opportunity. We all have that special gift that we need to explore.
We do.
We've got just a couple minutes left. Thank you again for being so open with us. That's what this show is about, is to learn from leaders like you who do open up and share, and I appreciate that. Give me a quick synopsis of in the 2 minutes we have left, let's talk about your best-selling book, Built to Scale, How Top Companies Create Breakthrough Growth Through Exceptionary Advisory Boards. Give us kind of an overview of that, and then what can our listeners expect when they read that?
Sure. So I've created the scale model. And as I mentioned, I put in the advisory board in my first company because I really was stuck on how to move to the next level of growth. And one of my advisors said to me, why don't you put in an advisory board? I looked around for information on how to do that, and there was absolutely nothing. There was no process. And so I came up with the model. I patented it and I trademarked it, and it's called SCALE. Stands for Select, Compensate, Associate, Leverage, Evaluate, Evolve, and Exit. SCALE, and it is literally the full end-to-end process that leaders can use to make sure that they are selecting the right people based on their specific needs in an organization, and then they learn how to leverage them and how to use this amazing tool to help them get to the next level. Because as you know, we met at a conference that had close to 1,000 leaders there. Right. We know that we cannot do this journey alone, and that we are only as strong as the networks around us. And so when we can be very intentional about hand selecting advisors that are invested in us and believe in us and want to see us succeed, when we can create that community, our potential is just unlimited.
Great advice. And having that type of advisory board is a game changer. Give me a quick example or case study of some change and improvement you've seen in an organization by following these principles.
Oh, sure. Well, so bringing leaders to the next level. So we work with a company. They're at about $170 million. Now they are about $170 million in revenue. When we started working with them, they were half that size. And their CFO had never built a business that was north of $100 million. He was figuring it out as we go along, as he went along. And I always say that building your first company is like building a plane, like when you're flying it. So we found him an advisor that was on their advisory board that had already built a company worth several $100 million. And he was just exposed to all sorts of things that he had never learned. When I had my advisory board, I used my advisory board to institute a program management office, because at one point we had 75 different projects going on, and it was like the wild, wild west. So one of my advisors did that. And one of my other advisors walked us into different federal agencies that resulted in millions of dollars worth of sales. So there's so many ways in which an advisory board can change your organization and change you as a leader. It's a matter of putting it out there, asking for help, and knowing that others can get us to where we want to be.
Marissa, where can we buy your book, and where can we learn more about your process?
So please visit our website at successfulculture.com. My book, Built to Scale, is on Amazon, and you can also go to builttoscale.info, but the book is on Amazon. I'm super active on LinkedIn, so anyone listening want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do there. Successful Culture is on Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. But successfulculture.com as well as Amazon will get you to my book and get you to my company.
Builttoscale.info, successfulculture.com, or look up Built to Scale on Amazon. Marissa Levin, thank you so much again for being our guest. Thank you for sharing your story, and I look forward to watching the next great things that you're doing.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing.
You've been listening to the Business Leadership Series, where we engage with leaders who are making an impact on their worlds and who want to share their knowledge and experience for your personal and professional growth. This interview was designed to inspire you to become the best leader you can be.